Well, hello there. Welcome to another episode of Think On. My name is Doug Ritchie, and I am delighted to spend some time with you here in the minutes ahead as we focus on something that I hope will prove helpful for you. Who am I? Why should you listen to me? Right? That's an important question, and I certainly it's not lost on me as I have been dropping videos and certainly plan to continue to drop videos on this channel on topics that I find to be very intriguing, interesting, and quite frankly consequential. Why should you listen to me? What I have to say, is it even worth listening to, and does it bear any weight whatsoever? And I think it's important for me to provide you information that will help you answer that question. I certainly respect the fact that it's not enough for me to say, yeah, you should listen to me. Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know, right? So I know that over the years, in my academic background and work in public policy, or even as a pastor, I've always found it to be very helpful when I was able to discover who the person is that I'm interacting with, whether it's something they've written, in book form. Maybe they've dropped an article or an essay, or maybe I'm listening to them on YouTube or going to an event where I'm going to be hearing them speak. When I find out who they are, what their background is, their academic background, their profession, the experience, it provides a foundation of understanding so that I can begin to assess whether or not what they have to say is going to bear weight. That doesn't mean that they have to be people that are just like me, or that they share my worldview. Certainly, but it nonetheless is important. It's helpful, and I've always found it a little frustrating when someone appears to be intentionally withholding information about their background, because at that point there's almost like this breakdown in trust, right? So in an effort for me to operate with integrity and the etiquette that I presume should be present in an online context like YouTube, I want you to have an idea of who I am, what my background is, the experience that I'm drawing from. And and quite frankly, you may disagree with me. You may not like something about my background, and that's okay. It's my background, and I certainly am comfortable with my background. There may be things about my own life and experience that I look back on and think, I wish I would have had a different kind of experience. But nonetheless, all of that plays into how I am approaching various questions of the day, right? So let me just start by saying this. I am an individual who was raised in a Christian home, in a blue-collar family. My dad was a machinist for 40 years nearly. He served in the Navy. My mom stayed home with me and my brother and sister until we were at a point, at least, where we were in school, and then that's when she started to kind of engage the job market, shall we say. But I was blessed to be raised in a Christian home. I was blessed to be raised in a home that saw the value of a good work ethic. My dad definitely demonstrated by a clear example what work ethic is, or at least it should be, and why he expected us to kind of follow in like manner. As I grew up, I was someone who, when I had just turned 17, I enlisted in the Missouri Army National Guard. And I had to have my parents sign off to grant permission for me to join the military. But between my junior and senior years of high school, I went to Fort Leonard Wood for basic training, completed basic training, went back to high school, finished my senior year, then went back to Fort Leonard Wood for AIT, or Advanced Individual Training, where I ultimately became a combat engineer and served for 8 years in that context. We did SAPA-related tasks, and I learned a lot at that time in my life. I've always been a bit of an idealist, and I felt, even as a young man, before I could really make the decision and join the military on my own without my parents' permission. I felt it my duty. I felt compelled to serve my state and country, and I'm glad I did. I learned a lot about leadership. I learned about service and sacrifice, and in working hard. I learned the value of training to the point of failure, overcoming obstacles, dealing with setbacks, and accomplishing the mission, and doing so with honor and integrity in the mix. Right. So I look back upon those times, and I'm grateful for the honor of serving my country and my state. During that time, I was in college as well. I went to a state university. On the academic front, I completed my undergraduate degree in finance and economics. I am a more of an Austrian economics guy, certainly somebody who am not much of a fan of Keynesian economics, and if you're not familiar with those terms, you might want to look them up at some point, because they certainly play out in a very practical way in life and public policy. But I'm somebody who certainly appreciates the work of people that are working even to this day, and even those who are no longer with us. Whether you're talking about people like Milton Friedman, or someone who still is with us in his senior years, shall we say, of Thomas Sowell, and even going back into history, Adam Smith and Bastiat and Mises and others. Those are fascinating topics when you think about the economics of not only life, but the free market, and the ever increasing pressure coming from a more socialistic approach, or a Keynesian approach, ultimately, in our context. Once I completed that degree, I ended up working in a professional context, ultimately in corporate training, but all within the context of a finance area. And then ultimately, I surrendered to the call to serve pastorally. When I was a young man at 16, I felt the call to pastoral ministry, but resisted that. And the Lord allowed me to run out the leash, shall we say, and then shortly after I graduated with my undergraduate degree and had worked in the context of finance for a while, I became quickly aware that was not ultimately where I was going to be, and ended up enrolling at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, where I completed 4 degrees. My graduate focus certainly earned my Master of Divinity. I earned an MA in Biblical Languages. I earned a Master of Theology, and then entered a PhD program in Biblical Studies, ultimately completing and earning a Doctor of Ministry in Expository Preaching. And for those outside of the ministry context, the focus of my dissertation was really on the way in which that we can communicate effectively when you have multiple audiences in front of you. So that's kind of my background, academically, with those degrees that I earned at Midwestern, along with my finance and economics degree. In many ways, I think that my academic background has been very helpful. I'm humbled by the opportunity that I've had in each of those degree programs, and I think the takeaway for me, broadly speaking, is it taught me to be willing to recognize that there's a lot that I don't know. And the beginning of a quality education, and ultimately even at the completion of a quality education, you're left with the awareness that you don't know what you don't know. And the best way to arrive at filling in those gaps is by asking really good, honest, and sometimes hard questions. In the pursuit of truth involves a kind of commitment to trusting that the truth will never mislead you. The truth is something worth pursuing, and as you're pursuing the truth, it's always helpful when you're engaging other perspectives or competing opinions to engage in good faith discussions, shall we say, on those topics, to explore what the other side is saying, understand what they're saying to a point where you could actually communicate it better than even they can. And at that point, you're ready to really begin to critique their perspective and to make a credible argument for your perspective as an alternative to what they're communicating, right? So I believe that academic integrity is important, and I've committed myself to that, and I that's how I approach the various questions or topics that come up, even more broadly, whether it's just life in general or public policy or even within the context of ministry. We have to be honest brokers. We have to be people who are committed to pursuing what is true and right and good. And certainly as a Christian, I want to pursue what is true, right, and good, and Christ honoring. That's consistent with the Word of God. And so you need to know that about me as I am dropping videos. You know that I'm coming at these types of questions. The way I'm communicating where I land it's going to be informed by that kind of commitment, right? Beyond those details of my earlier life in academics, I've spent nearly 3 decades in pastoral ministry. The most recent context, I'd spent almost 20 years at a congregation where I served, and have stepped down from that to engage in something else that I'll be just discussing here momentarily. But early on, I started out as an intern in a church plant. I was obviously involved in pulpit supply, preaching, and various pastoral interims before I ultimately spent nearly 25 years as a senior pastor. So I am a Southern Baptist pastor, so I'm a Protestant, Baptist, Southern Baptist with in the Reformed ranks, right? So I am a Reformed Southern Baptist, and I operate as one who has drawn deeply from a lot of different theological traditions, but I certainly believe that the Word of God teaches and directs us into the various elements of theological commitments and the way we order ourselves congregationally, how we approach evangelism and missions and polity and more broadly ecclesiology. From a Baptist Reformed type of perspective. So that's who I am in that respect. Beyond my pastoral ministry, I spent 8 years in public policy, ultimately 3 terms as a state representative here in Missouri, and those were overlapping. As I was a senior pastor, a full-time pastor, I was also in the Missouri General Assembly for 6 years, and 2 years prior to those 6 years of service, I was engaged in my first campaign to earn the trust and support of my constituents, engaging in public policy conversations and knocking doors, and certainly continued to do that throughout my time in the General Assembly. But for those 8 years, I was a pastor engaged in the public arena. And that should then clearly answer the question what I think about Christians and politics. I believe Christians can and should be engaged in the public arena. The Word of God communicates much on topics that are related to every sphere of life, whether we're talking marriage, whether we're talking sexual ethics, whether we're talking children, the rearing of children, life issues, truth, ethics, morality, the role of government, even the existence of government. All these things play out. The way we charitably respond to the needs of our neighbors. All of these issues are affected by and informed by the Word of God. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the General Assembly, though it was frustrating as well, to be sure. But during my time in the General Assembly, I enjoyed a number of various roles in leadership and chairing the Joint Education Committee, chairing the Government Accountability Committee. I was on the Budget Committee, and and several appropriations committee, everything from the education budget for higher ed and K through 12 education to social services and mental health, and on and on and on. That's certainly playing into the experience that I have been able to garner when we're talking about matters of the day or public policy. I ran as a Republican, served as a Republican. I'm a conservative, and certainly appreciate the fact that here in Missouri, the Republican platform is a very conservative document, championing traditional family values, championing the importance of life from conception to the grave, celebrating and recognizing the importance of public safety, conservative tax policy, conservative fiscal policy, limited government principles, matters related to our constitutional republic and the purpose of government itself. So that is a part of my background, and certainly those are commitments and convictions that I hold, and have been involved in a lot of debate and discussion and engagement and interaction in that context as a result, right? And that's, again, hopefully that is helpful for you as you are listening to videos in the future, or even thinking about videos that I've already dropped. Beyond my time in the General Assembly and as a pastor, I've spent 20 plus years as a law enforcement chaplain. Here in recent years, I've been less involved in law enforcement chaplaincy just due to my schedule and other work demands, but certainly have counted it a privilege to come alongside law enforcement as a chaplain, supporting them and encouraging them in their important work. I've served in law enforcement chaplaincy in terms of the Missouri State Highway Patrol and our local county sheriff's office. I've interacted with local municipal police departments, and even cut my teeth in fire chaplaincy as well. So when it comes to public safety and matters of law enforcement and the work and sacrifice that they're involved in, those are details that I've come to appreciate, up close and personal, shall we say. So that is also a part of my background. I have served as an adjunct professor. Certainly been involved in various contexts of teaching as a result. I've also served in higher education with respect to being on boards of trustees, overseeing administration, dealing with accreditation matters, and even helping to develop a particular program of instruction as well. So, higher ed is a place that I find to be intriguing. I love the context of higher ed. I believe in higher education, though I am someone who I'm very much convinced of the classical purpose of education, and I am frustrated by the fact that our contemporary perspective of a university education, an undergraduate degree, or what have you, has been truncated, to say the least. We have lost sight of the actual purpose and value of higher education. We have made it merely about career preparation. We've made it merely about job preparedness. And certainly a quality higher education degree will help with those things, but it's about something far greater than mere job preparation or career preparedness. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you might find interesting in terms of my background. I'm a pastor, legislator, someone that served in the military, served as a law enforcement chaplain for a couple of decades plus at this stage, worked in the context of higher education as well. Currently, I did mention, I'm no longer, actively pastoring. I don't think that my pastoring days are all behind me by any means, but currently I'm working in public policy for a Christian nonprofit that engages on matters of constitutional constitutionally protected liberties, religious liberty, free speech issues, conscience rights, parental rights, life issues, protecting against the harmful influence of leftist ideology, whether it's the LGBTQ ideology, where people are being compelled to use speech that is inconsistent with their conscience. These are the types of things that I've been working on in public policy here in Missouri, Iowa, and Kansas. And I'm also a senior fellow working similarly in the context of public policy, but that's in a limited scope, but serving and certainly enjoying my time as a senior fellow, along with my primary focus with a conservative Christian law firm that also works in the legislative space out of our litigation experience. So. So when I'm talking about public policy, I'm speaking about matters that, and that perspective has been developed out of a context of both ministry, real life experience, in the trenches, if you will, working as a legislator, being involved in those debates, working in public policy, and that's who I am, right? Beyond that, in terms of just my private life, my wife and I will have been married 30 years here in a few months. We've got 2 adult daughters, one of which has been married now for 4, almost going on 5 years, and our youngest daughter is in a graduate program to become a physical therapist. So, and we have 2 dogs as well. So. Anyway, I hope and pray that this is helpful to you. I'm not sharing this little biographical sketch because I think it's exciting news, to be sure. I'm doing this for your benefit so that you can answer the question, is this guy worth my time? Should I be giving him attention? Does what he have to say, does it bear much weight at all? And I'll leave you to that question. I'll let you answer that question. But in the meantime, I hope to interact again as I drop videos in the future, where we're able to engage the truth that informs faith and compels action. Thank you for joining me again today. Bye-bye.